What's up, everybody? So today I'm going to take you through another voltaic daily improvement method, and at the same time we're gonna have a twist involved because I'm going to be talking about a book that I recently finished, which is called The Dichotomy of Leadership. So we're gonna be taking some of the ideas from that and talking about them. And for those of you that are familiar with this book, The Dichotomy of Leadership, it's you'll probably have loved it because it's amazing. It's another book written by Jocko Willinks, and he's got a series of books that are all about leadership and ownership, and essentially how do you create a strong culture in teams? How do you what concepts are important in terms of creating high-performing teams? And given that I don't think there's really anything more intense in terms of a highly elite and demanding team environment than the Navy SEALs, it feels to me to be ridiculous as someone that's interested in team dynamics and interested in team performance to not look at that as like the pinnacle of this. I think it's very analogous in many senses. Obviously, your life is not on the line, but because of the fact that their life is on the line and they have to develop training methodologies, approaches, and they have to understand how to manage that environment, that's so hardcore that there's so much we can draw from that because they're pushing things to the limit for the purpose of life and death. That's what the scenario is. So with that said, we're going to be going through some of those concepts as we do the AIM training. So the training we're doing today is I've selected the precise tracking. No rhyme or reason, really. It's just the one that I decided I would focus on today. And just to look at this as well. So some of the priorities here are improving reading skills, reactivity, and reacquisition. So reading skills means I'm reading the movement that's happening on the screen. Reactivity means I'm able to react to what's happening. And reacquisition, I think, is one of the areas that people struggle with more, which is, okay, now the target just suddenly, randomly, unpredictably changes direction. Maybe, it's as extreme as a blink or a dash, which is a pretty extreme version of this because it includes something which is going to be a bit more extreme, which is the flick, because you have to flick to reacquire the target. And one of the things with these flicks is they have to be fast. You've got to react quickly to do them, but then the flick itself likely has to be fast because if the target is moving somewhat quickly, you need to catch up to it, and then you need to then instantly be smoothness again on the target. So that is a skill that can be challenging, but you can make a lot of gains on that. So we're going to be looking at focusing on these and you can see there's some extra little tips here. Move your mouse in one steady motion while matching the target's speed. Try to avoid any inefficiencies and jitter. Hold down fire during the entire duration of the scenario. One thing I would advise for people doing this sort of thing is it can be really helpful to bind a key on your keyboard to fire. And this, for some people feel like this is unintuitive, but I'm going to explain the logic here. And this was advice given to me when Minnie was coaching me directly a long, long time ago when I was first introduced to AIM training and on another level. I got the coaching from Minnie and I was like, holy fuck, okay, my mind was blown at the time. But he advised me to do this, to bind a key on the keyboard to fire. And the reason is because this allows you to further isolate the mechanics involved in the tracking. Now, some people might put forth the argument and say, well, this is not really realistic because in game, it's not like you fire with your keyboard. Now, actually, there are some players that do this. One of the most famous aimers of all time in Quake did this. His name was Toxic, and he had the best tracking aim. So, I wonder if there's something to this. I mean, there is definitely, I think, something to this because the trade-off is the fact that you don't have any pressure on your mouse interfering in any way with the movements, which actually makes a lot of practical sense. And in theory, it actually feels like it should be more optimal. It's just not the status quo as to what people do. But regardless, I'm digressing slightly. Ultimately, with AIM training is about isolation. So we don't actually mind too much that we are making it a bit more simplistic by removing the element of pressure that might otherwise interfere with our ability to track the target. And the reason is because there are a bunch of other techniques that we are wanting to focus on. And so by taking something off of our plate, in this case, it actually allows us to further dial in the techniques that would be otherwise harder to train because we also have to worry about the pressure on the mouse. So at the point in which you've improved these basic techniques, whether it's the reading skills, the reactivity, and the reacquisition, and the smoothness, and all these types of things, then you can reintroduce, if you want to in the AIM trainer, the pressure that's involved with just holding mouse one down. Now, obviously, another reason why it is actually a bit more practical is because of the fatigue element. If you're constantly pressing down and having pressure on your mouse button, given that aiming scenarios, unlike playing in the game, you're not going to be constantly holding down mouse one for like basically 10 minutes at a time. Whereas in the aim trainer, you can absolutely do that if you don't take any breaks between tasks. So that is a difference too. So with all that said, let's jump into this. And also I can start talking about the dichotomy of leadership. So the first thing I'm going to say to set this up, in case you guys are just not familiar with this at all, is the dichotomy of leadership is ultimately about balance. It's about having two ends of extremes and basically making the statement that we need to be flexible and understand what the context demands in any given scenario. So let me give you an example as to how this actually works. Using some of the summaries from the book and as well as some of the examples. So the ultimate dichotomy that is described by Jocko Willinks is in leadership is to care deeply about your people, to be able to make, also being able to make decisions that might put them at risk. And it's about building really strong relationships and caring, but also being detached enough that you're able to not allow your feelings to prevent you from doing what's necessary. So this is a really interesting balance to strike, because on the one end of the spectrum, you have detachment, and on the other end of the spectrum, you are deeply caring for your people. And so this is a good example as to what the dichotomy of leadership is. This is one example. Another example could be, for example, so those of you that have read his books, there is this idea of extreme ownership, which is a central tenet to good leadership. And also it's a very helpful way to view life in general, is extreme ownership. It's just a very positive way to, let's turn the volume of this down. It's just a very positive way to frame things, because it allows you always to make progress, because you're never passing the buck, you're never placing blame on others. You need to also not be unrealistic, because there is an unhealthy version there that could exist. But it is the sense that you have a responsibility and you have ownership over everything that's going on. And so this allows you, it's a pathway to agency. This principle allows you a pathway to deeper levels of agency, so that you're going to become someone that is better at fixing problems and solving, whatever's happening at any given moment. And this is really important. And I'll give you an example. Like if you're just blaming others, you're less likely to get in there and try to solve the problem. Like if you're having a team and you're trying to, oh my goodness. So this is wrist. This is gonna be like a wrist tracking situation for me with my sensitivity. I'm training my wrist only. So I'm gonna talk more about that in a second. So let's cover this point first. So with the ownership, it gives you a path to agency. So in a team environment, you need to create you want to have ownership with all the players, because you need it to be the case that they are very invested in anything and everything that's going on, that they always feel like they are able to be connected to what's happening. And so therefore they want to put in the work and the effort to ensure the correct outcomes are happening, even if it kind of doesn't necessarily fit their job description. They care so much, they're taking so much ownership, that they have that level of agency, that they're always activated, always switched on to what's going on. Let's think about what the opposite looks like. The opposite is, I don't give a shit, I have no buy-in, I don't care about what's going on. And if we think about winning, to win, you have to care. People who are some of the greatest winners in the world, what do they always say? I hate losing. It's a very common thing. And why would you be so emotionally connected to losing? Well, the way that you're so connected to losing is it's an emotional connection, because it's based on your values. You value winning so highly. You're so emotionally invested in that thing. It means so much to your sense of self, that for you to not take that seriously is for you to betray yourself. And so you hate losing so much because you care so deeply. And because you care so deeply, you either have the choice, when you're confronted with obstacles, to either take ownership of the obstacles and confront them and deal with them and grow through them, or you're left to care deeply and be left to be very unhappy, because your value is being assaulted in some respect, because you're not winning and that's what you care about. And you're basically deciding to do nothing or blame other people. Like, other people have nothing to do with your outcomes in life ultimately. Ultimately. I mean, you can obviously always make an argument. There are always confounding variables. There's always, things that you can't control, but there's a lot more that you can control than you think. This is an easy mental prison to get into, and it happens to the best of us. But that's also part of life and growing, is being faced with these experiences and then being like, oh shit, I am human. I am able to make these mistakes. Okay, so I just noticed something about this task. I'm gonna go back to the topic in a second. It has this bit here, which is interesting because I can't hit this when it's behind here. So what this is trying to actually do, because remember, like LG56, he's the architect. Like in the Matrix, he's the architect. He's designed it all. It's all designed with a purpose. And so essentially, what we're talking about with reacquisition, we know that this target's going to bounce off this wall. So this is, again, it's a very simple scenario. So we're not thinking, oh, but that's not a realistic situation. This is just helping me in this particular instance with my wrist smoothness, reactivity, and also reacquisition. We're making it really easy so we can warm up to the harder stuff. So I'm wrist tracking, and I'm holding here because I know that the target is going to have to strafe back out. And this isn't completely unrealistic because there are in the geometry of varying maps, your opponents might be limited and they may not be able to, there may be a wall here and they may have no other choice other than to either go back or to stay in that corner. So, something to think about, I suppose. So I'm going to track it. I'm going to leave my mouse here. And this is interesting because I have to, after adjusting, I have to pick up the smoothness again. This is forcing me to pick up the smoothness again each time. Oh, I can feel grit on my mouse pad. That's never fun. You can see my wrist tracking is a little bit sketch right now, but week 1, baby, week 1. Anyway, I've got to pick up some of my thoughts here. Actually, this is a lot harder than I thought. This is an experimental video. It's all very hard to aim train, to talk about the aim training, and to talk about other concepts at the same time. I'm struggling with this. I've always said to people, if you can have a conversation, it's like with running. If you can have a conversation, you're not running hard enough. Same thing here. If you're aim training and you can have a conversation, you can talk about a subject, you're probably not aim training hard enough, because with aim training, a lot of it is about intentional focus. We're trying to correct for specific aspects of our technique. So because of that, it requires active focus because we're constantly monitoring what we're doing, which obviously it's a trainer. You're not going to do that in game. In fact, what you do in the game when you're performing is you actually turn that part of your brain off. The reason why we're doing it here is because we need to change parts of our habits when we're aiming. And so that we need to be doing this because let's say if we want to improve, how do you improve if you aren't changing anything? If you don't change anything, by definition, you stay the same, which is not improved. To make the improvements, you have to make the correct changes, and aiming is typically executed in the game somewhat subconsciously, and generally it should be for best performance. So the aim trainers is one environment in which we can kind of focus on it very deeply, which is part of the strength. So we should use that strength. Right. So we were talking about ownership, but at the same time empowering others. So this is another dichotomy of leadership. So on the one end, you've got taking ownership of everything. On the other end, and this is a team environment this is a context, we're getting out of the way and we're letting other people take ownership instead. And we want to empower those people to do so, which is almost paradoxical. These ideas are almost paradoxical in some ways because you're trying to create this balance. Sometimes you have to take ownership of everything, and sometimes you have to empower others. Great leaders are able to do this, and one of the really important concepts of great leadership that I have understood through Jocko's books as well is the idea of decentralized command. So this is the paradox of, as a leader, I'm taking ownership of my team, but at the same time, they have to be able to operate in a fashion where I am almost disconnected completely, but they are in a spot where they can kind of execute what they're based off of what they are seeing, and they're not having to rely on other people in leadership to tell them what to do, to micromanage them or anything like that. They have been equipped and empowered to be able to make decisions themselves in that environment. And I would say that this is something that is in esports very challenging because it's just hard. It's just hard when you have these smaller teams, let's say Counter-Strike. One of the examples on a dichotomy of leadership is discipline and structure versus the opposite, like flexibility. So oftentimes teams will be overstructured, and what this does is it actually encourages players to think less for themselves because they are relying overly on the structure that exists, and they have been also asked to be very disciplined typically, and they've also been asked to follow the structure. So now they're uncomfortable with making changes when they see that the change is necessary. They're actually feeling uncomfortable. They're not going to be confident. They'll hesitate because they'll have to break out of the discipline, break out of the structure to achieve what they think is actually the best play. And so inside of themselves, they have this battle. Basically, it's like, okay, well, I have to be disciplined. This is all the training. Like all the training is there to be executed on game day, but at the same time, my intuition is telling me to do this other thing. So those things come into clash. And then you get hesitation. And hesitation, nothing kills you more in professional sports than hesitation. So, or lack of preparation, I guess. But there you go. So that's another one. So another one. This is a really good one too. As we go through this is going to take. This might be a long video. Fuck. So another one is nurture people, but know when to let them go. So on the one hand, you've got nurturing them. On the other hand, you've got like getting rid of them. And I think this one is definitely connected to being close to your people, but being detached. So it's kind of similar to that one. And I think this is really important too, because we have to try to be principle based at first. We have to orient ourselves around these objective principles that exist. One of the things that happens when emotions get involved, because you get very close to people, is it distorts your perspective, and it makes it very hard to follow the principles of leadership. And if let's say, the team is not about any one individual, the team is about the execution of the mission, and you're hoping that you can get people together with you that will allow you to kind of reach that goal together. And so if you've got someone that you've become very attached to, you may feel like you can solve the problems with them when you actually can't, or that it's not a realistic time horizon and that it will actually put the mission in jeopardy. Like how my scores are going down. I'll probably end up talking less about some of these ideas as we get a bit deeper. So before I do this one, let's see. Train hard, but train smart. Yeah, so this is another really important one. I've talked about this idea quite a lot, actually, in different terms. So on the one hand, you've got train hard, and on the other hand, you've got train smart. So training hard and training smart are not necessarily the same thing. And I've made this point where I've seen players actually fail. Oh, this might be more of an arm tracking if this goes really, really wide, which, yeah. So this is going to be more, I'm going to do arm smoothness right now. So what happens is, so much concentration. Okay, I gotta start again. So what happens is sometimes players will do what's comfortable for their training. So there's like, I'll add in more time. So they'll train harder. So, because people might look at that and be like, oh my God, this guy's playing 14 hours a day. Oh my God, he's training so hard. But in reality, is he training hard? I mean, what are you actually spending that time on? Usually what happens is people will put the time in the wrong places. Because they'll do what's natural for human beings and just do what's comfortable. And they'll just add hours thinking that will help them. And what generally tends to be the case when you add hours, it gives you this illusion that you're working hard, and you feel sharp because you're playing so much. Your mechanics actually feel pretty good, but you're not solving the fundamental issues typically. It's not the right type of training. You need the right type of training. And we need to be careful not to fool us. This is very hard for me for some reason. We need to be very careful not to fool ourselves when it comes to that. Yo, this is pretty tough. This is a really weird format. I like how experimental this is. I think it's basically making my attempt to do both of these things worse. So I'm really curious what you guys think of this. Trying to be time efficient here. I've got so much stuff to do. Okay. Because I was thinking to myself, I've got to do the training, but I also want to make content. And I don't have a lot of time today. Okay. Right. Let's do another one. VT centering 180. Okay. So be disciplined, but not rigid. We kind of talked about that already. Okay. Hold people accountable, but don't hold their hands. So this has a lot also to do with, this accountability has a lot to do with good team culture, because to hold people accountable in the first place, you have had to, it necessitates you setting up what the values and standards are for the culture. So what are the operating standards that your team lives and dies by? And then you need to have people understand why those standards exist. That's actually part of it. This is something that they talk about in the book as well. Is, you need people to actually believe. They're not automatons. Human beings are not automatons, even in the military. They need to understand and believe that they're doing something for a specific purpose that actually means something, that has value to them. And so that is going to help you to hold them accountable without holding their hands. Because you have to hold people's hands only in situations where they don't really care to be there. Because if they truly care, they will try to uphold the standards that you've set in the culture. So this element of ensuring that people understand the vision is important. This is why vision has to be kind of baked in, and the standards and values have to be baked into the team through the culture, and that the things that you do with the team are reinforcing of these ideas. This is why, for example, in Legacy, there's this sweep the shed example. Okay, so what's happening here? Okay, all right, I see. When they go close to you and the speed changes, it's kind of crazy. The depth change. I'm not doing a great job here. What's crazy when I do these aim trainers is I feel like an absolute pleb with aiming. But when I'm actually aiming in game, my aim's like quite good. A lot of this really is about smoothness and like target reading and just like reading the speed. And being comfortable with my smoothness at that speed, at the different speeds. That's how I usually feel about this. It's actually not too hard to get good at these things, but you just need to understand how the speed is and what the smoothness for that speed feels like. And this is adding in now speed and depth changes, so it's getting a bit more complicated in that respect. So we'll do another one, wide angle tracking medium. Let's give it a go. Oh yeah, I was going to share with you guys an example with regards to how this can work. So, because you can't just have a workshop and say, okay guys, these are our values and principles and standards and this is what we expect. You have to actually have it be the case that all these things exist in the day-to-day in some form or another. That is ideal, at least. So for example, in Legacy by James Kerr, where they talk about the New Zealand All Blacks, they had, the first chapter is called Sweep the Sheds. And the idea there is that, they're a rugby team, and after the games, the locker room's going to be like muddy and messy. And so the idea is that, okay, the most senior people, the coaching staff, the most senior players and stuff, they're going to start sweeping the sheds. They're going to clean up the sheds. And they're going to, even though these guys are superstars, they're not going to leave something like this to a janitor or to anybody else. And part of the philosophy and the principle there is no one looks after the All Blacks except the All Blacks. You're also, let's say you're a younger player, you're seeing your senior people, your leadership, the people that you're looking up to, actually doing these like very basic menial tasks that, again, like a janitor would normally do, or something of that, or someone like that. And so it's a really powerful way to instill humility, and also to instill like no one's too big for the small things, which are really important concepts, because the humility is important in the sense that it's crucial for learning, and it keeps the players that are obviously might have a bit more ego in some extent. It puts them in a place where it helps manage that, and it helps give them pride, because you will feel pride when you do this stuff, because it's like, who the fuck does that? Like, these are things like people just don't do that kind of stuff normally. Like, you're a superstar. But the fact that you do that, and you do it for a reason, and it's part of the vision of the team, it's part of the values of the team, it feels like you're doing something for the team in a way that's quite profound. And these types of things are really, really good at helping to reinforce and instill these values through doing something. Because you can't just, again, like as I said, our values of a team are X and Y. You actually have to have things in the day-to-day that reinforce these ideas. Okay, so with this one, we've got, obviously, you need smoothness because, okay, so first things first. So we've got a 360-degree scenario here. I'm arm aiming because of that. We're horizontally tracking, and I have to apply smoothness because if I don't, I get punished because they heal up. So smoothness is really important. And so I'm going to try to optimize the smoothness more than anything else. And this is training, so if it looks ugly, that's fine. I say that because I'm concerned about how ugly this looks. Maybe after all this, I'll finally get Master Complete. I'm really curious how this is going to help me with the actual benchmark tasks. They're gonna be in here somewhere, so we'll get to that. Oh no. It's beginning to feel better though. Do I get another one of these? Oh no, we're moving on. We're moving on. Okay, so here's another one. Be a leader and a follower. So these are obviously very paradoxical. It's a paradoxical idea because how can you be a leader and a follower? Well, you obviously are not at the same time, but that's the whole point. We need to figure out when should we be a leader and when should we be led. And this ties into empowering others and decentralized command, because what you're saying is some people have perspectives or specialized skills that I don't, and they may be more equipped to lead in a certain scenario. So something that you could draw from this is, let's say, your secondary or even a third caller in your TAC FPS team. So that player can see stuff the in-game leader cannot see. And so there are scenarios where they need to make a call, and you as the in-game leader need to be like, you need to not be like, I am the in-game leader and I make the calls. And instead you need to be like, you need to become a follower in that particular example. One of the things here is like good leaders can take charge and make hard decisions. However, they can also listen and follow others. They can recognize, respect, and navigate disagreements instead of bulldozing their way through. I have some summaries here to keep me on track. Right. So I think that's a really good one to highlight. Being able to lead and be led. Oh, this is... God. Precise tracking is my kryptonite. I find it really hard for some reason. I've experimented. What's interesting is I found with different mouse shapes, it's a lot easier potentially than this one. But I love this mouse shape. It feels the best to use. So because of that, it's like it's something that I just can't. I can't stop using it. So I want to learn how to get better at it with this. And with that said, like this mouse shape performs really well when I'm actually competing or playing. So like these scenarios are very. I feel like these are very hard. You're not going to be necessarily in situations which demand as much accuracy as this typically, but much like we're talking about with regards to having your training be harder than the actual thing, that is training smart, in my opinion. Having diverse training is also really nice. As long as you're spending the time effectively. So I need to have smoothness. Like you can see, I'm kind of jittery on these lines, and my smoothness is not very good because it's subtly changing direction when it goes, right or left. It goes up or down, like very subtly. So I'm kind of losing it consistently here. So this is a challenging one for me. Okay, let's give it another go. Let's try to apply a bit more focus, shall we? Shall we? I'm gonna check OBS, see if you can. Yeah, you guys can see my mouse okay. All right. God, this is really an interesting video right now. All right. I have a very fast sensitivity, and it is really hard with this. I'm also oh my god. This is also all arm tracking, by the way, as you guys can tell. Arm is my weakest of all of everything. It's just fingertips and wrist for me are much more developed. And actually, I posted a picture on Instagram and also on on Twitter the other day of my old setup, and you'll see like a mouse pad that's just like basically, it's so small. You know, you can understand why I was a wrist and fingertip player. Like you know, playing Quake especially, it's just so little space. Like running out of space on my mouse pad as I say that. So this might even be too hard for me because I'm really struggling with this. But we'll see what, you know, I believe in VDIM, so we'll just keep running it and see what happens. Swav track is like, I think, one of my absolute worst. So here we go. But let's throw in another dichotomy here as well. Plan but don't overplan. So this, I think, ties in very much to the discipline versus flexibility one. It's like, okay, your planning needs to account for the fact that there could be disruptions. So what do we have here in the summary? For a mission to succeed, you need careful planning, find solutions to prevent and mitigate controllable risks, and manage contingencies. Yet, if you try to develop solutions for every problem, you'd be overwhelmed. So yeah, very similar idea to the overstructuring thing. You just want to have a balance. All right, so let's really try to focus on this one too. I'm just right now just trying to follow the general direction, and I'm not concerning myself as much with actually being on this absolutely minuscule target. And the reason is because I'm trying to just get my arm to just figure out the directions, how to like hold a clean line in a direction. Because that's like step one for me, I feel like. That's how bad this tracking is for me. Oh my god, I'm so bad at this. I shouldn't have picked precise tracking. I'm really exposing myself here. So exposed. But what's really great is so much progress to make, right? Oh, thank God we can move away from it. Okay, be humble but not passive. Humility is about realizing that you don't know everything and seeing beyond your own needs to consider the wider strategic perspectives. However, taken to the extreme, it can lead to passivity, i.e. failing to take a stand or push back on things that truly matter for the team or mission. Oh, another really, really good one, honestly. This one's very tough because you do need to be decisive and you have to go with what you have and be confident in that what you have is enough and what you have can work. And obviously you should have a foundation for that belief, but at the same time, it's really important to keep your eyes open. So what might this look like? This might look like, for example, watching VODs of other teams and regions. Even though you do a lot of VOD review and you think you understand how the game is played, never looking at like another professional team like, oh, what they're doing is really stupid, but trying to understand what is the merit of that, like what's good about that, what can I learn from this. What's actually interesting is I've had my own dichotomy that I've lived by for many years, which is the same kind of thing, which is be the student and the master. So you're the master, because you're spending all this time to master something and you're treating yourself with that degree of like how do you think a master or something would act, basically? How do you think that they would behave or think? So you're treating yourself that way, especially if you've achieved great things. Like let's say you've achieved the pinnacle of something, let's say with casting, for example, something that I've gotten to the top heights of. It's very easy when you're doing something like that to be like, okay, I know everything. I'm really good. I'm the best. Let's say I've just done the major final or something like that. But what you need to be doing is, what's the principle here that you want to follow? If you want to continue to grow, then thinking like that is going to prevent you from seeing the other opportunities out there to learn. Because assuming that you know everything all the time is going to essentially shut the book on learning. So you want to be open to learning, to be the student, and to give respect to those that also have a lot of achievements or skill, but at the same, so you can learn from them. But at the same time, you still hit that master balance where you're decisive and you trust what you know right now, and you know that it's solid. Okay, this is looking a lot better than the other one. Fuck. So my eyes are firmly fixed on the targets here. Okay, so that was Swift track intermediate close. Oh, okay, so we're gearing up to do the actual Swift track task, which is in the benchmark. Now this particular one is the hard version of that. So this is harder than the actual benchmark one. Oh man. So you can see the reactivity, the smoothness. This is the smoothness part, and then the reactivity bit and the reacquisition is it changes direction. So you have to react quickly, and then you have to reacquire, and so you want that to look pretty seamless. See, I'm struggling here. Like I said, the precise tracking is really, I find it very challenging. So this is smoothness is an issue for sure. Which is partly a tension thing, I think. Being overly tense. Obviously, a lot of that stuff changes based on your setup. And I still haven't done a setup video. I've been meaning to do a setup video. It's very basic and easy to do, and I just keep forgetting to do it. So usually with the, so what happens for me with this is I'll be arm tracking and then I'll use my wrist to reacquire. That's what I'm doing here. Because again, it's definitely advisable to try to use all the tools at your disposal as they might, you know, as they apply. So you guys are like suffering through. I mean, what I'm hoping, I guess, with this is that you guys are suffering through the same training, but maybe you're not. Maybe you're actually listening to this more like a podcast. Maybe that's what's happening. So I'm definitely tensing up too much because of the challenge. This is something that happens, by the way, in game as well. I'll talk about that in a sec. I have to figure out how to track with this mouse. So hopefully the VDIM will help me a lot with this. I'm definitely tensing too much. My arms, I can feel like the soreness in my arm like building up. And this run was absolutely garbage too. I forget what point I was going to make, but that's okay. So the last one here in these summaries is be focused but detached. We talked about detachment previously as well. So this is an interesting one because this is about paying attention to the details without losing sight of the big picture. That's kind of ultimately what this one means, which is very, very important. And so when it comes to like a team perspective, I mean, I think this is obvious in terms of the micro macro scenarios where there's something happening in the micro, but which feels really important in a vacuum. But when you zoom out and you look at things from a macro perspective, it might change entirely how you think about that particular scenario. Oh. That feels like, something mechanically I'm not doing well with tracking. I've considered asking all of the aiming people that I know who are good at aiming to give me some feedback. Maybe now I'm training again. Maybe I'll ask someone. Or you guys could give me feedback too. Man, this looks rough. Looks rough. And you can see my high score. This is my benchmark high score, so I've had much higher scores in the past. We've got another two attempts. Okay, so we kind of finished a bunch of the points that I had in summary. But I do think it's really interesting because what we're doing with that sort of dichotomy of leadership is what we're trying to do is categorize. We're creating like categories, like ways to kind of think about common circumstances and how we can make decisions. So it's like a decision-making model. So you observe what's going on, and it allows you to better make decisions as you kind of ponder a scenario through the lens of these dichotomies. No. All you can do is stay focused on the target. If you start missing, it's fine. Just stay focused on the target. I'm running out of mouse, but don't keep going this way. What are you doing to me? I mean, everything's fine. Oh, wow, that was really bad. I got one more try. Yeah, this is rough. So this is a glass pad. We've got the final mouse with so many skates on it. So many. The reason that I did that is because it gives a bit more resistance. I was like, maybe I should have a little bit more friction. Okay. We got this. I'm wondering if I should use more wrist on this as opposed to just arm isolation. Okay, so that seemed to help. And adding in a bit more wrist to aid the tracking was helpful for two reasons. One, it just felt easier to stay on target. Two, it felt easier to reacquire because my wrist is already in motion on the movement. So that gives me just a little bit more control because the wrist is already activated. Okay, angle track intermediate. So now we're going to be going into, I wonder if it's axi track. Is that what we're building up to? Steady track. Oh fuck, steady track is a kind of a beach. I might have to speed this one up a bit because I've been training for a lot longer than I thought that I would be. So I might have to start skipping some of the reps. And aim training like this really helps to give you an understanding of how you aim because there's so much of a focus on it. So here I'm aware that I know that I have to use my arm to do vertical movements ultimately and to keep myself in a place where I can be fluid no matter what it does. Because my fingertips, my wrist will have limitations, but my arm will not. So my arm is being supplemented though by my fingertips, which necessitates a specific type of grip for me to make this work. You know, one of the best pieces of wisdom from aim training coaches that are worth their salt is that there's no best way to do anything, which I think is fun. All right, so like I said, I'm going to skip through these, maybe do one at a time. All right. Okay, let's do it. Movement reading. To change directions, can you move the mouse cleanly in the direction that it's going? My goodness, what was it doing? This is actually very useful for deadlock, all this shit, which is why I'm doing it. Remember, yesterday, or whenever the last video went out, I was saying I'm doing VDIM because I want to try to perform better in deadlock. Because I'm going to try to play some competitions. Oh my goodness. Too much tension on my fingertips right now. It's actually murdering my hand. Because I'm trying to work out, how do I combine arm, wrist, fingertips on some of these things? This is, for me, fingertip tracking. This is all fingertip tracking, really. So, with that range of motion, that's where my fingertips are probably more optimized. So, but that is a thing too. You know, you can train your arm or wrist to do more than maybe you would want them to as well, and you can experiment with that to see how it feels. Okay, let's do this. Oh dear. All right. Learning to incorporate my arm really saved me a lot because it just gives the ability to kind of always be in this like neutral position, so I can kind of always move the mouse like wherever it needs to go, and then if I need to, I can start using the wrist and fingertips. But also what you'll probably find is that your performance will be a bit worse when you are introduced, or like very intentionally focused on your technique control. Because you're noticing so many things that you're not going to be thinking about when you normally do things like this. And so that's one reason why it's going to be like that. Okay, so this is the hard version, I think, of... No, it's not. Okay, never mind. Okay, so this is going to be precision but arm, which is very hard for me. So we've already established. Yo, this is so hard. Part of me is like, man, you're already showing everyone that you're like terrible at this, and then you're at the same time like making videos about aim training. Now, obviously, to coach people, you don't have to be actually amazing yourself. But I do believe in like trying to practice what you preach to an extent. So, whoa, I'm really far away from my high school, that is. And also for me, it's like very instructive to oh my God, dude, my crosshair is the size of this orb. Also, how the oh my fuck, dude. What? But yeah, it's very instructive for me. So that's why I'm really excited about the competing. Oh, Jesus. Okay. So here, you have to get the feeling. Like it's the feeling of what does it feel like to track at the speed that is necessary here, the smoothness that is necessary. It's like a different feeling that you need. Oh, 1 second. What's up? Okay, listen, back. We're back. Okay. So yeah, because it's about like training the feeling, and the feeling is, it's hard to explain. It's kind of like, for those of you that are trained in the gym, you know, there's this idea of mind-muscle connection. You don't just have mind-muscle connection, generally speaking. Like some people, you know, have a more intuitive sense for it. They're more kind of, it's more intuitive. But for most people, you're going to have to get the feeling of like, what does it feel like to activate this muscle in the right way? And that requires focus and just awareness and just being sensitive to what's happening. And this is the same type of thing. And I can give you another example. My favorite example is the throwing the ball. When you throw a ball into like a thing, a basket or something, your brain is doing trigonometry. You've got no fucking clue how to do trigonometry. You can't convince me otherwise. At least not in that way, right? Not to calculate the trajectory and the energy that's required and so on and so forth to get the ball into the basket. But what you do is you throw something and you get a feeling, right? It's a feeling. It's like, okay, if I kind of like, it's just, you just feel it. So what that feeling is it's your brain's, let's say the communication of all that trigonometry and stuff, you can't comprehend that in your conscious brain. So instead you get like this intuitive feeling, or it feels like this. And that feeling is something that's trained as well, because when you're throwing stuff into the basket, you know, to begin with, you don't know how much is too much power, how much is too little power. But what you do is you can create the data, you get the reference points, and you're like, okay, a little bit less power, a little bit less power. And then you get a feeling for the trajectory, but you don't know like what the angle is precisely. You wouldn't be able to tell me the degrees specifically of that angle, but you get a feeling, and it comes from experience, and it comes from paying attention, and it comes from trying to be in tune with this stuff. So, okay, so we got the dash, so wrist flick, a little bit of fingertips for me. So the temptation is to just like flick too fast. They don't need to do that. That's what I'm learning myself here, or training myself. Don't have to flick as hard as I am flicking. No. All right, fuck. That was terrible. I'm really running out of time here, so I might have to skip a little bit. Skip a few tasks here. After you do stuff like this, so if aiming in game does feel easier. You got to be careful with these sessions because they get long and they're fatiguing. And transferring the feeling into game does take time. It's not really a one-to-one thing typically, because your brain already associates like doing things in a specific way when you're in game, and because you're not intentionally consciously thinking of what your aim is doing, because that does decrease your performance on mechanically. So you're in this situation where you do have to, in your practice, constantly remind yourself, oh, I should be aiming like this, I should be using more arm here, I need to be kind of doing this, and you're forcing in changes intentionally, and you kind of try to drip it in to the training whilst you're practicing. Okay, let's skip. Let's do a steady track hard, and then we'll do a steady track, which is the final task essentially. Okay. Okay, here we go. Even though I'm not hitting this target really, I like feel like I could be. Like it feels a lot better, because one of the main issues I've been having is, can I like move the mouse like smoothly and cleanly in the directions it's going, like the weird sort of diagonal movements and so on. This is the harder version, so we'll see how I do on the other one. Shit, man. Well, hopefully we can finish with a bit better of a performance here as we move into the easier version of that task. Oh, fuck. Alrighty, let's do it. So I think one of the issues I have with this mouse on tasks like this is I get like subtle grip changes that make things tougher. Because what I find is mice which fill out my hand more, I have better performances on with these types of tasks. And it's because my movement with my fingertips is much more restricted. Like you can see here that it's a really big difference to my high school where I was at previously. So just for some context, I haven't done like serious aim training in quite a while. Because I haven't had anything to train for, which is kind of important for me to motivate myself to do the training. Because otherwise, I know that the skill is going to drop a lot when I take a break. And I know the breaks are inevitable. So I'm like, okay, well, I want to not just be ready to perform when there's nothing to perform in. So, all right. With that said, interesting video, an hour long. We chatted about some interesting stuff. I hope you guys enjoyed this format. I don't know what to think about it. Let me know in the comments if you made it this far, what you think about this type of format. Yes, no, should I do it longer? What should we be doing here? All right. Thank you very much. See you later.